Chapter 934. The Burning Legion is here. With an astonishing momentum that was like raging waves that could split a ravine. Even the most imaginative allied army warriors would never have thought that the Burning Legion's first wave of attack would be like this. Without the druids urging, the giant trees surrounding the camp at the foot of the mountain withered rapidly. Although the giant trees that once required a few people to wrap their arms around them didn't scatter upon contact like withered tree bark, it was obvious that they had lost their strong vitality. Originally, the orcs wanted to cut down the wood and place it in front of the camp's first line of defense to serve as antlers or build arrow towers. Under Duque's insistence, all the orcs had retreated to the camp on the mountainside of Mount Hyjal. Only 2,000 elves were left to monitor and delay the enemy near the two peaks. Suddenly there was a loud rumbling sound from underground. It was the sound of a huge tide rolling and running. Every night elf and blood elf looked at each other. No one knew what was going to happen. But to be on the safe side, Tyron's deputy, Melander, and Lilith, the commander of the frontline Blood Elf Rangers, ordered their men to climb over the top of the mountain and hide behind it. They left a dozen people behind to monitor the situation. As expected, the enemy appeared 3 minutes later. It was a spectacular super fountain. Wrapped in indescribable black liquid, tens of thousands of undying were sprayed into the sky from underground, scattering in all directions along with the black liquid. The tribe's camp, which was already in ruins, was once again ravaged. The immortals, big and small, were sprayed into the sky and fell down again under the acceleration of gravity, falling everywhere with banging noises. The smallest were zombies that only had half of their bodies left, the bigger ones were ghouls, and the biggest ones were abominations that weighed several tons. These monsters that had long lost their lives and had almost no intelligence to speak of were already attacking the surrounding buildings before they could even get up. In front of the elves and the few troll scouts was a frenzied undead army. They used their broken teeth to bite the wooden arrow towers, used their rusty machetes to hack at the half-broken mud walls made by the orcs, and used their huge arms to smash at the camp's wooden walls. The black fountain continued to gush out, spraying more and more undead army into the abandoned campsite. Suddenly, a black cloud floated over from afar. It was thousands of gargoyles as well as many huge, white skeletons and death ice dragons that were surrounded by a freezing aura. Dust rose from the ground. It was a mixed army of undead and evil demons, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. At this moment, Thrall, Wajin, and the other horde leaders who had retreated to the mountainside all looked grim. If it wasn't for Duke repeatedly reminding them to retreat, if they really continued to defend at the foot of the mountain, they would probably be wiped out. There were zombies constantly breaking through the center, tens of thousands of enemy flying units above them, and a large army pressing on the border. It was estimated that the remaining 20 to 30,000 elites of their tribe would all die here. Thrall hurriedly summoned a night elf priestess who was in charge of communication. He pointed at the live broadcast in the magic mirror. What if the Mount Hyjal defense line continues to be breached by the big bugs? The priestess puffed out her chest and spoke in the common human language that wasn't very fluent. Don't be afraid. Mount Hyjal is a sacred mountain that has been blessed by the Night Elves' magic for 10,000 years. The mountain itself is extremely difficult to penetrate. If there are no more big bugs of the same level as before, we don't have to worry about attacks from underground. What if there are more? Thrall emphasized. The Night Elves shook their heads. According to the Alliance commander Marcus, there is only one big bug called Auro, even among the 4 ancient gods of Azeroth. What if the enemy's air force flies directly to the top of the mountain? The priestess was very sure. The sacred mountain has a powerful anti-air magic array. Everything more than 300 yards above the ground will be attacked by Breaking Dawn mages at all times. Even a demigod can't withstand such an attack. And after going up the mountain except for the main passage, everywhere is a dead zone. Thrall finally felt a little relieved. In this way they only had to defend the front. At this moment, Thrall saw the elves in front begin to retreat. Because of the terrain, the undead army looked very fierce, but they were always a distance away from the elves. The area within 200 meters of the elven army was an absolute dead zone. The elves nimbly ran between the mountains and the woodlands, occasionally turning around gracefully to shoot an arrow, blowing up the heads of the zombies or ghouls charging at the front. The elves fought and retreated. Arrows rained down, but they still couldn't stop the tide of zombies that numbered in the tens of thousands. It's here. Thrall raised the hammer of destruction in his hand. Prepare for battle. After coordination, the Alliance gave up the first and second city walls on the mountainside and left them to the tribe to guard. Thrall's shout caused the entire valley to reverberate with the unique battle cry of the tribe. Loktar. Not long ago they had lost their campsite for no reason, so the orc warriors' chests were filled with anger. They raised their steel axes and hammers that had been baptized with holy water high up in the air and let out roars filled with fighting spirit. At this time the black tide was very close. Cover fire. Number 1 shooting unit, fire. Behind the first city wall, there were 100 dwarven mortar squads. The thick and round cannons immediately let out a deafening roar. Bang bang bang. In any case, it was difficult for the orcs to adapt to the somewhat dull sound coming from behind them, and some orcs even subconsciously shrank their heads. But the elite dwarven gunners were not just for show. The mortar shell flew into the air and drew a beautiful arc. Then it followed the downward slope of the mountain and flew to a faraway place. It happened to be 200 meters behind the elves. Boom boom boom. The small caliber mortar shells were enough to blow up the zombies and ghouls with weaker defenses. The dwarf's cover was so accurate that Thrall breathed a sigh of relief. Even Wajin, who was ready to let the troll throw spears as cover, quietly put down his hands. It was ironic to think about it. Although they were of the same race, the elves and the trolls had been fighting for tens of thousands of years. When did they ever try to cover each other like this? When the last elven ranger rushed into the city gate at high speed, the 12 ox-head warriors could not wait for the winch to slowly pull up the moat. They directly pulled the thick chains with brute force and pulled up the suspension bridge. Looking at the 7 huge horizontal gullies with a depth of more than 8 meters in front of the city wall, blocking the entire mountain road, Thrall's scalp was numb. These were the masterpieces of the dwarves' steam bulldozers. Fortunately, they bumped into the zombies that did not know what fear was. From another perspective, if he were to use the orc army to attack here, how many lives would it take to fill these gullies? Chapter 935. The tide of the undead army was too terrifying. The mortars bombarded the horde of zombies, and every shell blasted dozens of zombies into smithereens. They either died with their heads smashed, or their bodies mutilated and lost the ability to move. The zombies that didn't have much sanity left stretched out their arms and sprinted up the mountain. Some zombies were pushed to the ground by the zombies behind them because of missing legs and other reasons. Even so, they still waved their rotten limbs, crawled like dogs, and used both hands and feet to madly rush up the mountain. If the zombies in front were too slow, the zombies behind them would roll over their companions and continue their charge. At this moment, Bulang Bronzebeard, who was behind the third city wall, was playing with his new gift, the weird-looking gun in the shape of a bug. He glanced at the zombies impatiently. Param Golden Hammer. Yes, sir. A dwarf officer holding a huge hammer and wearing rare golden armor responded on the spot. Fixed target. Number 1 shoot at the source. 3 sets of small steel cannons. Cover the area. Don't slack off even if we're covering for those damn orcs. But, from another perspective, we're letting them remember the battle at Blackrock Mountain. Bulang's evil smile quickly spread among the dwarves. Hee hee. 15 years was like a generation for humans. But for the dwarves, who had an average lifespan of 800 years, 15 years felt like a month for humans. Every dwarf warrior could still remember the humiliation of being blocked by the Bloodring tribe at their front door, and not being able to enter their own garden. They didn't have the romance of hunting with guns, and they didn't have the spare time to collect the treasures from the mines. The dwarves were very unhappy about working with the horde. The orcs were once slaves of the Alliance, and now they had no place to stay. They could only run across the ocean like stray dogs. Why do we have to work with those damn green-skinned dwarves? The dwarves didn't understand. If the order wasn't given by Commander Duque, who had always supported the Bronzebeard dwarves during their most difficult times and had never lacked food and medicine, the dwarves would have used guns filled with gunpowder but without bullets to shoot that fellow. Why are the faces of the Black Iron dwarves black? Ever since we sprayed his face with our muskets, it has turned black. This was a clumsy dwarf-style joke, but it also reflected that if one didn't have some achievements in the Alliance, it would be impossible to control this group of irascible dwarves. Alright, Bulang had chosen the small steel cannon that had beaten the horde into dogs back in the Scorching Canyon. The small steel cannons that shone brilliantly in that battle were, in fact, many more were built later on. Who knew that after the battle at Scorching Canyon, he would no longer have a use for it? At one time, the watchtower in the blasted land had 36 small steel cannons at most. Later, as the times changed, the small cannon was replaced by the more powerful Little Duque cannon. The dwarves never lacked iron ore, and it was quite troublesome to recycle these finished products. As a result, all those small steel cannons could only be placed in the warehouse to play games with the dust. Duque had instructed the dwarves to bring the small steel cannons in this rare battle across the sea. He even said that they would respond to tactics and abandon the cannons at any time. Since it was an outdated piece of trash, Bulang was naturally happy to obey. Who would have thought that it could be used to scare the orcs? As expected, when the large cannons boomed from the third wall, many of the older orc warriors were almost scared to death. This was a nightmare that had traversed 13 years in time. Every old orc who had been captured in the scorching canyon remembered the humiliation of being forced to surrender by the terrifying firepower of the dwarves. Those bastards! Varrock and Brock, the two veterans who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, were instantly enraged when they heard the dwarves' wild laughter that seemed to have been deliberately suppressed. Sar had just rejoiced at the support of the dwarves' cannons when he noticed that many of the incomparably heroic old orc warriors were behaving unnaturally. What's wrong? Sar. In the end, it was Grom, who had experienced the war but not the last battle of the Scorching Canyon, who told Sar the story. What? Are you sure that this is the small steel cannon that destroyed the last orc army? Sar fell silent. Although the relationship between the Alliance and the Horde had shown signs of warming up recently, the damage done to each other in the past was too deep. The Horde had slaughtered many humans, dwarves, and high elves. The Alliance had also destroyed the Troll Empire and enslaved the orcs. This was already a bad debt. Pass down the order. Our enemy is only the living in front of us. Don't be distracted by the small details. We will prove the glory of the Horde with merit. When the Horde warriors calmed down, they found that the dwarves' cannons were still very powerful. Under the sunlight, many huge black cannonballs fell from the sky. They landed accurately on the seemingly wide mountain path that was hundreds of meters wide, sputtering out with sparks that ignited pieces of the ground. They screamed over the two huge walls, creating a hellish scene in front of the orcs. Sal suddenly understood why the incomparably brave orc seniors in his heart had broken down and become captives. This was not a destructive weapon that mortals could resist with their bodies. Without becoming a professional, there was no chance of survival in the face of this level of attack. Logically speaking, in the face of this kind of attack that could wipe out everything within a 100-meter radius, there shouldn't be any existence that could survive. But Sar found that he was wrong. A large number of abominations, stitched together with countless corpses, actually passed through the line of destruction and rushed to the bottom of the city wall under the seemingly destructive cannon fire. After all, it was a blind spot that the cannons could not reach. Attack! Wajin's command sounded. Behind the widened shooting holes, the trolls stretched out their long arms and threw their steel spears at Wajin. These terrifying spears that could kill a Tauren with one spear could not stop the movement of the abominations for even a second. These monsters, whose faces were shot through, regardless of whether the eyeballs on their heads were still there or not, were playing with human ladders under the city wall. They used their flesh and blood to build a sloping passage that could climb over the 15-meter-high wall. The dead should rest in peace. Sar waved the hammer of destruction in his hand angrily. Chapter 936. With a roar, the huge black square-headed hammer in Sal's hand emitted a blazing light like a small sun. A huge abomination that pounced towards Sal with its arms wide open was hit in the head on the spot. The abomination had the appearance of a big fatty, and its waist circumference was at least 5 to 6 meters. Under this hammer strike, the stitches on its body directly burst open, and the flesh that was forcefully stitched together emitted scorching sparks. In the next moment, its huge body was torn apart on the spot. Sal originally thought that he was already quite violent, but he was suddenly frightened by a loud roar that sounded in his ears. It was Cain Bloodhoof. This burly Tauren chief, who was a size larger than Sal, was at his youngest and strongest age. A gigantic totem pole that could be used as the main pillar of the Beastmen barracks swept across, and two abominations that pounced at him were cut in half at the waist. He picked up the lower body of an abomination and threw it out effortlessly, like a bowling ball or a cannonball. The dozens of abominations that were swarming towards him were instantly knocked down. Even Grom, who had chopped an abomination to death with an axe, was dumbfounded by this scene. The place that the dwarves chose to build the city wall was naturally the narrowest and steepest part of the mountain path. It was 200 meters long from left to right. It sounded very long, but in fact, it was absolutely extremely narrow for a battlefield. Excluding the taller and sturdier bastions that protruded from the city wall, the actual length of the wall was only 150 meters. It was guarded by the various tribal chiefs, and regardless of whether they were ordinary soldiers or elites, they would be annihilated no matter how many came. Seeing that the number of the undead army was gradually increasing, Wajin waved his hand, and immediately the orcs on the bastions worked hard to shake the handle of the pump up and down, using the FFF flamethrower that once terrified the tribes on the undead army. The city defense version of the flamethrower was even more insane. After the improvement, the fire oil was clearer and had a higher burning ratio. Due to the 45-degree mountain terrain and the fact that they had the upper hand, the flame tongues could easily be ejected 100 meters away. After a few rounds, the 8 bastions had turned the narrow mountain path into a flaming purgatory. With the explosions of the small cannons and the sprinkling of the flamethrowers, even if there were occasionally elite abominations that were bathed in flames, it would only take a single strike from an orc centurion or ox-head warrior. Grom held Blood Roar in his hand. His eyes seemed to have traveled through time and space back to the Grand War era. Once upon a time, the battlefield between the Alliance and the Horde was a battlefield dominated by strength, skill, and courage. That was the era when the elites of the Draenei tribe who had experienced the Draenei War wantonly flaunted their military might. That was until a human named Duke Marcus appeared out of nowhere and completely changed the situation of the battlefield. His little invention, the F-type flamethrower, had caused the 100,000 elites of the Warsong clan to be unable to advance an inch in the Silverpine forest. They had no choice but to rely on the Blackrock tribe, which had innate fire resistance as their main force. Unexpectedly, after 13 years, it was the orcs' turn to use fire to deal with the Calamity army. "Be careful," Varrock suddenly shouted. Everyone suddenly realized that there were many giant abominations wrapped in a frosty aura that boldly charged through the dead zone of the cannonballs, passed through the sea of fire, and killed their way to the city wall. "Use fire bombs," Thrall ordered decisively. At the back of the platform on the city wall, the orcs hurriedly threw out the metal shells in an extremely rough manner. Then when the so-called fire bombs were thrown into the sea of fire, an even more intense flame burst forth. The temperature was so high that even the orcs standing upwind couldn't stand it. Not to mention the abomination in the sea of fire. The high temperature caused its fat body to continuously lose weight. The essence of a corpse was still fat and bones. As long as the fire was strong enough, the abomination itself was a huge flammable object. The abomination that had worked so hard to break through the purgatory was defeated just like that. Ah! If the Burning Legion is only at this level, let alone 3 days and 3 nights, I can even defend for a week. A young orc warrior said proudly. As if it was a slap to his face, a large group of gargoyles began to fly over from afar. Thrall's face darkened. Get the wolf riders ready to throw themselves into the net. At this stage, the tribe was so poor that they didn't even have many wyverns. How could they fight against thousands of gargoyles? Fortunately, the special nature of Mount Hyjal reduced the height at which the gargoyles could climb. Otherwise there would be no need to fight at all. In fact, other than the net, the tribe's more effective long-range weapon was the less efficient javelins in the hands of the trolls. Of course, the tribe still had shamans. Unfortunately, shamans were so rare. They were all treasured and feared to melt in the palm of their hands. Other than leaving them to the rear to treat the wounded, Thrall would not let the shamans go to the front line until the last moment. At this time, Bu Lang, who was on the 3rd city wall, accidentally fired his larva of the giant worm. Bang! A huge gunshot rang out, giving the surrounding Alliance warriors a fright. Bu Lang's face was not red and his heart did not jump. He was full of nonsense. "You don't even understand this. I fired the gun as a signal to tell you that it's time to load. Type 3 bullets." The so-called Type 3 bullets was also Du's bad taste. When he came up with this idea, he didn't expect the dwarves and gnomes to come up with it. However, the dwarves weren't afraid of having a big brain. They were afraid that your brain was not reliable and would waste a lot of materials. Duque, who seemed to have a big brain and was reliable, was naturally the god of invention among the dwarves. During the 10 years he was away, the dwarves regarded Duque's idea as the Duque Bible, and developed the Type 3 bullets, and mass-produced them. The dwarves' version of Type 3 bullets used a large shell with many burning bullets in the shell. Using the small steel cannon as an example, the shell was 1 meter in diameter, 3 meters in length, and weighed 1,360 kilograms. There were 996 to 1,200 bullets in the shell, and there were many versions such as the small steel cannon and the small Duque cannon. Once it was fired, it would be like a goddess scattering flowers. No matter how many air forces there were in that area, they would all be wiped out. What? You're asking why they didn't just use shotguns such as the grape shot from the cannon? The grape shot's range was too short, it couldn't hit far. Moreover, if they fired from the back of the orcs, once the shell couldn't go around the front wall and hit the orcs, but the Alliance and the Horde might start fighting before the Burning Legion could reach them. Just as Thrall was bitterly preparing to fight, the small steel cannon that had killed their predecessors opened fire again. It was different from the big shell that exploded when it hit the ground. This was a cone of fire that exploded in mid-air like a beautiful firework. Chapter 937. Half a minute ago, all the rookie orc warriors subconsciously raised their heads. With a slightly confused and helpless expression, they even forgot to hold up their shields, bitterly becoming witnesses to the spectacle in front of them. It was an enemy so dense that it looked like a dark cloud. The gargoyles, which were almost free of the shackles of gravity, had the strongest limbs, sharp and dark claws, a demonic face and scarlet eyes that flashed with the most demonic fierceness. A moment ago the entire defense line of the city wall was still bathed in sunlight, but suddenly the sky darkened. The army, which lacked mobility, was passive whenever it faced the agile and soaring air force. Coupled with various factors such as range and hit rate, the Horde warriors could only be beaten up at this time. Originally, Sal was prepared to suffer heavy losses. Unexpectedly, as the roar of artillery in the distance behind him became more ear-piercing, Sal discovered with his amazing dynamic vision that the dwarves had changed the cannonballs to larger red cannonballs. They weren't blasting at the ground but throwing them into the sky. It looked like fiery conical fireworks blooming in the sky, and they broke the black haze of death in a unique manner. Each red cannonball was equivalent to over 1,000 tiny flame warheads. They poured their destructive power unscrupulously into everything flying in the sky. Sal saw with his own eyes that a cannonball passed by, and the nearest gargoyle was directly turned into a sieve. The wings, which were as solid and thick as a stone wall, were full of holes of all sizes. The head and chest, which could have been broken with a sledgehammer, were full of potholes and continuous cracks. The mountain path of Mount Hygel, which had a limited flight altitude and area, was definitely the best place for the dwarves' magical cannonballs to show off. With one shot, at least 30 or 40 gargoyles fell from the sky. The originally dense and numerous gargoyles were like dark clouds, but after a few rounds of artillery fire, they suddenly became riddled with holes. Many gargoyles, after falling from the sky, still did not completely lose the ability to move. They still drove their burly bodies to climb in the direction of the city wall. Sal curled his lips. Wajin. Understood. Groups of dark spear trolls rushed to the top of the city wall. They stood behind the orc warriors, stretched out their slender arms, and swung their arms to throw out round stones. When it came to throwing, the trolls had a talent that the beastmen could never hope to match. Stones the size of kettles drew a straight line in the air and struck the gargoyles on the ground. Crack, crack. The sound of rocks shattering rang out everywhere. Ah, awesome. This feels so King good. The orcs and oxhead warriors were still cheering loudly even though they were defending the city walls. The miserable state of the enemy was their best stimulant. At that moment, people from the Alliance arrived. A small group of knights found Thrall, who spoke awkwardly in orc language. Your Excellency, the first line of defense is saturated. Vice Commander Turalian hopes that you can temporarily abandon the first wall. Give up. We've only just warmed up. There are so many good lads behind us who haven't even touched the enemy, Tauren Chief Kane muttered. Sal looked at the continuous walls on the mountain road, and then looked at the death passage in front of him that had been filled with corpses. He waved his hand to stop Kane. No, we have lost the geographical advantage. We still have to defend for a long time. Retreat. The messenger knight was relieved. Tribal warriors who have just been injured, please retreat first. Behind the second line of defense, there will be specialized medical teams to take care of them. Don't worry, it's not just the dwarves' cannons. The night elves and blood elves sentries and rangers will cover your retreat. Thank you. Sal replied humbly. The messenger knight raised a red flag and waved it behind him. Sal immediately felt the cannons behind him become more intense. The cannons in the sky and on the ground were at least twice as dense as before. Apart from a few accidental injuries, 99% of the cannons hit the burning legion. He nodded in satisfaction and had his men cover each other's retreat. Over 10,000 tribal warriors were divided into 4 teams. 3 teams retreated first, and the 4th team stayed until the first 3 teams entered the 2 gates of the second line of defense before retreating. At that moment, the zombies and ghouls that were rushing up were stopped by the extremely accurate and sharp rain of arrows. The abominations and gargoyles were greeted by the dwarves' cannons and muskets. The tribe only paid the price of less than 100 lives before successfully retreating. Damn it, I should have adjusted the shooting parameters just now and blown those damn green dwarfs and the undead monsters away. Param cursed. Bulang slapped his forehead. Why didn't you say so earlier? The dwarves were speechless. But more dwarves looked at the few human knights sent by the Alliance General Command. The dwarves finally knew what these humans were here for. They were afraid that the dwarves would act recklessly when they were hot-headed. On the Burning Legion's side, a fierce debate broke out. The Dreadlord, led by Ansaron, thought that they should slow down and find a countermeasure. The Alliance's cannons are too powerful. We don't have enough cannon fodder and the terrain is too narrow. It's not a good idea to attack blindly. The Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar, sneered. Ansaron, you've been in this world for too long. Is your brain broken? The Burning Legion has destroyed countless worlds. This one will be no exception. Ansaron's face darkened. This is the only planet where the Burning Legion has failed more than once. Even Master Sargeras has lost contact here. Since they were talking about their boss, Asgalar couldn't go on. Since you're so afraid, let me take the lead. The Lord of the Abyss moved his fat, four-legged lower body, picked up the heavy double-headed double-edged sword, and left with a laugh. Ansaron stared at Asgalar's back and spat. Idiot. I'll let you and your men consume the dwarves' cannons. As one of the first higher demons to enter this world, the Dreadlord had a full understanding of the combat power of the mortals in Azeroth. Before Archimonde's arrival, if it weren't for the Lich's solidification of the fortress and the effect of protective cannonball, condensed by a large-scale magic circle, the Scourge Legion would have been defeated and attacked to the city of Lordaeron. If Lordaeron fell, then the entire Lordaeron continent would likely become a piece of iron again, and the Burning Legion would have no way to attack. Fortunately, Archimonde arrived. After a while, seeing Asgalar's mountain-like figure, the human warriors on the second wall didn't look good. Mograine spat down the wall. I thought only the Horde was unlucky. Chapter 938. A 15-meter-high wall was the limit that the Alliance's engineering team could achieve in a short period of time. Even if cement was better than the old stone brick wall, there were still various load-bearing and foundation problems. Mograine knew very well that if it was the Alliance from 15 years ago, the brothers could only rely on wooden fences that were 5 or 6 meters high to resist the tide of the Burning Legion. However, reinforced concrete and so on could be used to block zombies and ghouls. In the face of such a great demon that was 8 or 9 meters high just by standing, it was simply a joke with their lives. Not to mention the Abyss Lord that looked a bit like a dragon man. If they didn't stop him before he reached the wall, the 3,000 Alliance soldiers on the wall would die. Call for help. Mograine ordered. Immediately, magic messages, bugles that represented a strong enemy and a call for help, and the most traditional way of sending messages on horseback were launched at the same time. The experts of the Alliance and the Horde learned of the existence of danger almost at the same time. Thrall, who had just entered the third layer of the wall to rest, frowned. Not only the reaction of the Alliance soldiers, but also his keen perception of the shock coming from the distant ground. Although he hadn't officially become a shaman, Thrall's natural talent was unparalleled. Let's go up the wall and take a look. Leaving Varrock to look at the troops, Thrall immediately took Kane, Grom, Wajin, and the other chiefs and a group of personal guards to the third layer of the wall. The huge and terrifying figure in the distance was immediately reflected in the eyes of the experts of the Horde. Looking at this figure that was extremely similar to Manaroth, Grom immediately remembered the humiliation of being fooled. On the fifth layer of the wall, Kale, who had been pretending to be calm, was originally elegantly sipping black tea. Suddenly, his long golden eyebrows trembled, and his gentle temperament changed at that moment, becoming eager and full of fighting spirit. He was no longer the noble elf prince, and he could take the change in identity calmly. Because this was a sin he had done for the sake of family. For him, kneeling in front of the Sun Chaser King's court had already repaid all the kindness of his father, King Anastrian, who had raised him. All that was left was to wash away the shame of having once sided with the Scourge army. During this period of time he had received a lot of supercilious looks. Wherever he went, the blood elves who used to be his compatriots would either openly or secretly point fingers at him. Thanks to Duque's effective guidance and suppression, the entire Alliance treated him and his followers fairly well. He did not deliberately make things difficult for them or exploit them, nor did he use them as cannon fodder or complete impossible tasks. It was because of the fairness of the Alliance that he desired to atone for his crimes. Facing the Burning Legion on Mount Hyjal was the stage that Kale, had been looking forward to for a long time. That's right. Only the blood of the Burning Legion could wash away the stain on his name. I, Kale Sunstrider, have never truly betrayed my own people. Even if I can no longer become a hero, I will at least become a man who can walk proudly on the land of Azeroth. The moment he received the magic message, that's eyes were filled with hope and desire. It's time for us Redeemers to take the field. The powerful warriors of the Alliance and the Horde are already at the front line. How can we fall behind? Yes, Your Highness. Caponia, Solarian, Saladre, Segunar, and other hardcore followers all stood at attention. They puffed out their chests and sucked in their stomachs, looking at their most respected prince with feverish eyes. Even if the world deprived that's of his noble status, in their hearts, that's would always be their prince. When that's opened the portal and arrived, the city wall was already full of Alliance and Horde powerhouses. There was a winding mountain road in the distance and the left side was full of cliffs. Turalian pointed at the huge figure moving quickly along the winding mountain road and said in a worshipful tone, "According to the intelligence that Lord Marcus, the commander of the Alliance, risked his life to retrieve, that huge half-dragon, half-human demon is the Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar. Excluding the giant bug Oro who was destroyed at the camp at the foot of the mountain not long ago, he is one of the 6 leaders of the Burning Legion's invasion. He is quite difficult to deal with. What Lord of the Abyss, isn't it just a matter of my axe?" After playing guerrilla warfare for more than a decade, Grom had to learn the common human language, and then he seemed to have learned what it meant to be arrogant. Mograine pointed at the large group of demon guards around Asgalar, who were also around 5 meters tall. "If you can rush to the fatty under the protection of so many demon guards and kill him, then I'll respect you." Grom's face turned red. Thrall grabbed Grom and said in Orc language, "If Duque hadn't saved you, you would have been dead. For Duque's sake, don't argue with his subordinates. If you're a man, then fight on the battlefield." Grom snorted heavily. Turalian coughed and continued, "According to the intelligence, those are elite demon guards. Unless you're a powerhouse who has stepped into the hero domain, or a mysterious person who is at or above the Radiant Moon rank, you can't effectively kill them." Thrall asked, "Even your cannons can't do it?" Suddenly, a loud and boorish voice jumped out from beside Thrall's legs. "If it's possible, your dwarf grandpa wouldn't be here." Thrall was shocked. Only then did he notice that there was a dwarf not far away from him. It wasn't Thrall's fault. The Lordaeron area where he grew up had never been a dwarf's territory. Even he had only officially seen a large number of dwarves after coming to Mount Hyjal. He wasn't used to it yet. Facing the tribe's giant looking down on him, Bran Bronzebeard was even more upset. "What are you looking at? Do you believe that I'll shoot you if you keep looking?" The tribe's giants all said in unison, "Humph." Turalian rubbed his eyebrows. "I still don't have enough reputation to control these warriors." He could only try to smooth things over and pretend that he didn't see their conflict. Then the job of covering up will be left to His Majesty Proudmoore and the other 4. Jaina, Ronan, Kael, and his 2 followers bowed slightly. As time passed, Asgalar and his men finally crossed the first wall. Standing on the first wall, Asgalar raised his heavy sword and slashed at a fort next to him. The heavy sword wasn't too sharp, but the combination of weight and strength was a terrifying destructive power that mortals couldn't imagine. The gigantic double-headed heavy sword cut through the entire fortress made of reinforced concrete as if it was cutting through an oversized piece of tofu. The sound of steel bars breaking and cement bursting could be clearly heard even from the second wall 200 meters away. Every single one of the soldiers of the Allied army held their breath. Chapter 939. The demon guards rushed past the Lord of the Abyss like a tide. The mid-tier liches behind the army worked together to cast a battle magic spell. It was a huge ice shield with a radius of nearly 1,000 meters. The cannonballs that crashed down were melted by the black icy aura in mid-air, unable to land on the demon guards at all. "Ah, you see this? Lowly creatures. Weak creatures like you don't even have the right to join the Burning Legion. It's futile no matter how you resist. Your only outcome will be the same as this tower, completely destroyed." Ah. The Lord of the Abyss, Asgalar, wasn't speaking in the common language of the beastmen. Instead, it was a language unique to demons that could directly enter one's soul. The vicious words rushed into the hearts of every Allied army soldier without any hindrance. Tisk. Every Allied army soldier's face was filled with indignation. Those standing at the front of the city wall were either chiefs or queens. Even a clay figurine would be enraged after being humiliated by a greater demon who was so good-looking, not to mention a powerhouse who was at the top of an area. Jaina gave a thumbs up in a domineering manner. In the next second she turned her wrist and pointed her thumb down. Only 4 cold words jumped out of the mouth of the newly crowned Queen Kultiras. Kill them. In an instant, the 5 radiant moon archmages at the front of the city wall emitted strong magical waves that could be seen with the naked eye. Ronan was in the center, Solarian was on the left, and Caponia was on the right. Arcane energy condensed into a thick soup around the entire Archer Tower. Behind them, Jaina and Kale, rose slowly. Under Jaina's feet was an ice pillar that was growing taller and harder than steel. Kale, floated in the air on a spinning pillar of fire phoenixes. When the purplish-blue arcane radiance reached its peak, the 3 arcane masters pushed out their hands at the same time. Arcane energy so dense that it was almost solid shot out. Go! Jaina shouted angrily. Kill? Kale, murderous aura burst forth. When the ice and fire magic that was large enough to overshadow an entire team of sky archmages converged into that unparalleled arcane energy, an incredibly destructive war spell had been completed. Heavenly River of Frost and Fire. It did not exist in any single person's list of spells, and even Morningstar wizards did not have the control to use it. Only those at the peak of the Radiant Moon realm could perfectly fuse 3 different types of tremendous mana together to form this incomparably terrifying war magic. The surging yellow, white, and blue elements easily overturned all the beings standing in front of the second city wall. It didn't matter if you were an elite of the Burning Legion that roamed the universe or an abyssal lord that wreaked havoc across the stars. Even a Breaking Dawn mage might not be able to unleash such a powerful move, so all of you had to scram. Even though the abyssal lord Asgalar was filled with arrogance, he didn't dare to open his arms and take this blow head-on. He had no choice but to cross his arms and hold his heavy sword in front of him. Bang! With a momentum that was 100 times more amazing than the monstrous waves hitting the reefs on the shore, Frostfire Galaxy easily destroyed all the guards around Asgalar. Even the abyssal lord, whose weight was measured in tons, had no choice but to be blasted 100 meters away along with the first city wall. The magic circuits of the 5 radiant moon archmages were empty, but their cloaks fluttered in the wind. Coupled with their proud expressions, everyone knew that they were feeling great. That's right. This was the ferocious might of magic. Annihilating hundreds of elite evil demon guards and liches with a single blow, as long as Mount Hyjal was victorious, the 5 of them would definitely leave a deep mark in the history of magic among humans and elves. Bastard! 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 Mere scum, how dare you send me, Lord Asgalar, flying? Unforgivable. Asgalar, who had just crawled out of the rubble with his armor still intact, had the word, disheveled, written all over his body. Feeling greatly embarrassed, he didn't care about anything else. Carrying his huge double-headed heavy sword, he charged towards the second city wall like a high-speed train. He wanted to use his unimaginable strength to directly destroy the defense line that these little bugs were so proud of and smash them one by one under the heavy sword. Suddenly, a khaki figure that was only half his height blocked in front of him. Ah! You overestimate yourself. Go to hell. With the shocking impact of running at high speed, Asgalar launched a sudden stab with the heavy sword. In his imagination, even a mountain would be smashed by him, as if that kind of short and pitiful bug would definitely be smashed into pieces by the sword. Miscalculated. The wooden totem pole that was no smaller than his double-headed greatsword burst out with a green natural brilliance that he couldn't understand. Under the innate divine power of the Tauren, the totem pole and the heavy sword collided like stars. The final result was unexpectedly a draw. Cain Bloodhoof, who blocked him, staggered a few steps back. Even the solid ground couldn't withstand this terrifying impact. The powerful hooves forcefully kicked out stacked stone waves. Asgalar didn't have it easy either. Each of his legs took 3 big steps back. Finally, his 4 short legs couldn't bear his exaggerated weight, and he sat on the ground with a loud thud. This wasn't the end. Just before he sat down, the enraged Lord of the Abyss threw his terrible heavy sword at Cain. In the distance, Sal was so scared that his heart almost broke through the confinement of his ribs and flew out of his chest. Cain, who was still in a state of exhaustion after forcefully blocking the heavy sword, widened his bull eyes and looked desperately at the heavy sword that was inserted into his chest. I can't dodge it at all. Anyone could imagine that in the next moment, the highest-ranking war casualty since the start of the Coalition War would be born. At this critical moment, a golden greatsword as wide as a door panel descended from the sky. Alexandros Mograine performed an extremely gorgeous jump slash and directly deflected the heavy sword of the Lord of the Abyss by a little. A slight difference could lead to a huge difference. The double-headed greatsword brushed past Cain's neck and cut off half of Cain's mane. It seemed that Kane's neck was bleeding, but people with discerning eyes knew that Kane's life was saved. Good job. Another gorgeous figure leaped high into the air. The violent scarlet axe drew the most amazing arc, crossed the space of 30 meters, and struck Asgalar's head with one move. With the smoke and dust raised when the Lord of the Abyss fell as the background, it was the figure of a powerful orc hero named Grom Hellscream. I said that whatever Lord of the Abyss is just a matter of my axe. Chapter 940. Pretentiousness was like the wind, always with me. Lord Howl's pretentiousness was so off the charts that all the heroes who had just covered for him and blocked the sword for him were overshadowed. They all became mere background decorations. That's right. Without the cover of the 5 archmages, without Kane and Mograine to resist the attack of the Lord of the Abyss, Lord Howl could not find a chance to kill anyone. However, the beastmen who revered strength would not care about this. Their eyes would only see the sharpest and also the last move that would kill them. All of a sudden, all the orc guards who had followed Sal to the second wall let out a fanatical roar. Oh, hero, hero, hero. The first warrior of the horde, Grom Hellscream. After the chaotic roar, it was the uniform roar unique to the horde warriors. Every roar was accompanied by the raising of a weapon, the cold gleam of a sharp axe, the light of a heavy hammer. The cheers of only 100 people condensed the momentum of 1,000 people. The soldiers of the Alliance were also cheering, but unfortunately, it was not as enthusiastic as the Horde. After all, the last axe was not the hero of the Alliance. On the Burning Legion's side, Dreadlord Ansaron could not stop scolding, "Trash. Trash. You're all trash." Since landing, the Burning Legion had not encountered anything good. First, Reki Winterfrost was inexplicably ambushed by the Alliance commander Duque. His head was chopped off and even his soul was destroyed. Then the seemingly powerful giant sandworm Oro was killed by the enemy's ultimate move. Then there was Asgalar, who was full of momentum but was killed by the mortal heroes in a few moves. The 3 chief-level guys all died a little inexplicably. Glancing at the extremely calm Khazroga and Kazak, Ansaron knew that Sir Archimond would not enter the field before confirming that the other party had a strong enough powerhouse. Both of them were Doomguard-type demon lords with special abilities. This time he had to enter the field. On the bone thrones near Anartheron, there were 5 dreadlords with the same huge bone bat wings sitting on them. Although everyone was a dreadlord, there were still different ranks among the dreadlords. After the former leader, Tichondrius, was killed, Anasaran was now the most popular replacement leader. He needed a perfect victory to propel him to the position of leader of the dreadlords. He suddenly had an idea. Humans, elves, and orcs are all lowly and weak. Let the endless Burning Legion destroy them. He had seen too many mortals fiercely resisting. But how many mortals could maintain such a high-intensity battle? Regardless of whether they used holy light or swords, as long as they were mortals, they would tire, get injured, and overuse their life force and spiritual energy or even die. After interrogating the souls of the dead at Azhara's beach and the camp at the foot of the mountain, they knew that the total number of people in the allied forces of the 3 factions on Mount Hyjal was not large. It would not exceed 200,000 at most. The Burning Legion's numbers were 10 times that of the allied army, and most of them were elites. After a little thought, Ansaron sent a small number of ice dragons and gargoyles in a rather sparse density. It would be too much of a loss if they swarmed up like before and were blasted down by the dwarves without even having to aim. Obviously, Anasalan's tactic worked. The Burning Legion's air force was larger in number but not too densely packed, forcing the Allied army's long-range firepower to pay more attention to the sky. Many times the Alliance had to send the Griffins to contend with them. It was obvious that this was more effective for the Allied army to bleed. It was the same for the ground battle. The moderate but continuous attacks made the Allied army tired to deal with them. Basically, whenever the corpses in front of the city wall accumulated into a large slope, enough for the undead army behind to rush up, the city wall would be breached. In just 3 hours, the Burning Legion broke through 5 layers of the city wall in one go and fought all the way to the 7th city wall. At this moment, with the Horde's heroes as the arrowhead, the Allied army launched an extremely fierce counterattack. Under the cover of artillery fire and elven arrows, the Allied army actually fought their way back from the 7th layer to the 1st layer. What infuriated Ansaron was that the Allied army pushed a large number of fuel barrels and directly set fire to the mountain path. The intense fire with a temperature of over 1,000 degrees made it so that only the air force could pass through. Ansaron once tried to get the liches to use frost magic to extinguish the fire, but the effect wasn't ideal. Often, as soon as the fire was extinguished, more black oil would flow down from the mountain, and the fire would continue to spread along the black oil. And because of the solidified magic array on Mount Hyjal, no matter how fierce the fire was, it was only within the range of the mountain path and wouldn't spread up the mountain. This fire bought the Allied army more than 3 hours. The second time, Ansaron thought that the Allied army no longer had the black oil, so he ordered the Scourge Legion to launch another fierce attack. In the end, Ansaron was shocked to find that there were 7 more layers behind the original 7 layers of city wall. This time they fought for another 3 hours. Then it was the Horde who led the counterattack and chased the Scourge Legion back. After hundreds of Dark Spectres were destroyed in a row, Ansaron received a piece of news that drove him crazy. The Alliance was frantically building the city wall along the winding mountain path at a rate of 1 layer per hour. That's right. Our mortal army can't outlast the Scourge Legion, but we can stall for time. If we can stall for 3 days, it will be the Allied army's victory. After realizing that the Allied army didn't mind stalling for time, Ansaron felt like he had been slapped in the face several times. No way. I have to do it myself. All of you follow me. Behind Ansaron, 5 dreadlords followed. In front of him was a tidal wave of Abomination army and a group of about 100 Death Knights. Hundreds of Hellfire over 10 meters tall held down the rear. In the sky, a huge death dragon was slowly circling, and thousands of gargoyles were flapping their black wings. The high-level dreadlord Ansaron was out. Logically speaking, this lineup should be punching Mount Hyjal, stepping on Azeroth, commanding the world, and no one dared to disobey. Who the hell told you Turalian to use Quell Zarim to release the meteor blast? And who told you Mograine to use Ashbringer to release the despicable Thunderbolt? You broke the rules. All of you broke the rules. Where's the referee? Yellow card. No. Red card and 100-game ban. Who are you? Who the hell are you? I Yamit. In the face of the menacing Allied forces, Dreadlord Ansaron and his men beautifully pounced on them. Chapter 941. His surroundings were chaotic and countless strange lights flashed in all directions around him. I'm going back. In the confusion, Duque felt that he had gone back. He returned to a warm but comfortable doghouse. He graduated from university and changed from a glorious university animal to an even more glorious person in society. He lived the fulfilling life that his seniors mentioned. Because the kind and generous landlord increased the rent every year, her flower-like daughter yelled "Sumida" all day long, and absolutely refused to spoil Duque, an ordinary great man who was far from being a little fresh meat. This allowed Duque to avoid a wonderful love disaster. Therefore, the single-dog Duque decisively moved to a cleaner and tidier urban village. He lived in an independent kingdom that cost 1,000 yuan per 10 square meters. He lived almost every day at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he had to enjoy the scenery outside the window of the 3-hour subway. So comfortable. There were aunties dancing Little Apple at 10 o'clock at night. There were commercial flights flying at 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. There were daily demolitions of houses in the urban village that started at 6 o'clock in the morning and rented out to university graduates. None of this can affect my enthusiasm for the boss fight in Duque's territory. Damn, it's already the era of the monthly card. The only one who can fight me in reality is Brother Electricity. At this time there was a mysterious female voice calling Duque. Duque, wake up. The world needs you. The demon duo called Kazroga and Kazak is too powerful, we can't handle it. Duque replied in a daze. Kazroga? Kazak. They are all antique-level weaklings. Who can't solo these days. Go by yourself, don't call me. The owner of the mysterious voice seemed to be angry. Damn it. I'm not asking you to dream, I'm asking you to face the demon lord in reality. That monster that is 50 feet tall. Wake up, as long as the world is not destroyed by the Burning Legion, I will do anything you want. Duque smacked his lips, his voice deep and magnetic. Come on, let me swear on my conscience, I really can't do this job. I'm just a lowly and bashful boy who has never even touched a girl's hand. Ever since I was young, I didn't even dare to eat sh*t, and you actually want me to fight some demon lord? Are you kidding me? After saying that, Duque stretched out his right hand in a daze and touched his left chest. Yes, he touched it. Could it be that he had been training dumbbells too much recently that his chest muscles had developed so much? It was soft and bouncy. At this time, another enigmatic queen's voice appeared. His voice was filled with anger and a smile that no one knew what he meant. What a coincidence. I don't dare to eat it either. Suddenly, without warning, pop. A sharp pain on his left cheek made Duque's head spin. Duque, he forcefully opened his eyelids. He was awake. The first thing he saw was an angry Jaina and an extremely sullen Servanas. So I didn't transmigrate back. It's better not to go back. Think about it. I'll go back and be an engineering university animal. Before I graduate, I'll be a female pig competing with Diaochan. Every festival, I'll be showered with affection by a handsome guy who found a girl outside of school. I'll be fed dog food and I'll be urged to submit my experiment report. After graduation, I'll have no money, no house, and no girls. Even if I'm handsome, it'll be useless. I might as well go to the hospital for a vasectomy. Moreover, I'm not handsome. Despair. I'm in despair for this world of dog abuse. Although in Azeroth, even toothbrushes, toothpaste, and toilet paper had to be researched by him, and every 3 to 5 years there would be a world-ending crisis, but at least he had status, ability, and a harem here. Thinking of this, Duque sat up on the bed, his face facing the sky at a 45-degree angle. A crocodile tear fell from the corner of his left eye. Earth is too bitter, I'm not going back. Queen Sylvanas thought about what would happen if she slapped Duque awake. Maybe Duque would be like a wronged wife, or maybe Duque would be noisy. Queen Sylvanas wasn't afraid of any situation. Duke was the only one who was unusually silent and crying bitterly. Could it be that I interrupted the restoration of his magic circuit? Thinking of this, even the fearless Queen Sylvanas panicked. Ignoring the unreliable night elves, Duque was already the last trump card of the alliance in the Horde. If something went wrong on Duque's side, the world might really be finished. Duque, I didn't mean to wake you up. The situation is too dangerous. Queen Sylvanas' voice unknowingly carried a faint sobbing tone and a pleading tone. Dangerous? Duque seemed to be talking to himself. Yes, more than 40% of the soldiers have been killed. None of the Alliance's masters died, but most of them are injured. The key is that we can't win against the 2 demon lords. Now Mograine and Cain are at the front, Jaina said quickly. Duque suddenly fell silent. After a full 3 seconds, he suddenly came to his senses and grabbed Queen Sylvanas and Jaina's hands. Wait until we defeat the Archherons. If I'm still alive, I'll be with the people I love and love me forever. The first half of Duque's sentence was not wrong, but the last sentence made Queen Sylvanas furious. Wait, you still want to be together? It's fine if the 3 of us go. I've tolerated Alucia before me. Are you going to add those cats and dogs and messy women? Queen Sylvie suddenly smiled. Her smile was as bright as a flower. Yes. Your body, are you sure it's okay? Like the magic circuit or something? I'm fine. Duque, who didn't know that a disaster was coming, seemed to be still in a daze. Then justice fell from the sky and Queen Sylvanas slapped Duque on the right side of his face. You little bastard. This scene left the bystanders dumbfounded. Queen Sylvie stood up abruptly and rushed to the door with large strides. Suddenly she stopped. With one hand on the door frame, she did not turn around. Although you're a bastard, seeing that you might be able to save the world, I agree. But I warn you, don't go too far, or I'll incite my sisters to leave you. After that, Queen Sylvanas strode out of the door as if she was escaping. As soon as Queen Sylvanas left, Jaina also pulled back her hand that was held by Duque. She stood up, flicked her cloak behind her and turned around. Duke Marcus, you think too highly of yourself. You actually want to take 2 queens at once? Who do you think I am? I'm the noble queen of Kul Tiras, Jaina Proudmoore. There's no way I'll give myself to a bastard who has a harem. After that, he used flash and flashed out of the corridor. A few seconds later, Jaina's vague voice floated over from afar. If you can help me get revenge, maybe it'll be a different story. Why are all of you suddenly so arrogant? Chapter 942. At this moment, Servanas' voice drifted into Duque's ears from afar. If there's nothing else, quickly get out. There's a pause outside. You have 30 minutes at most, everyone is waiting for you. 30 minutes? That's enough. Duque smiled and lifted the quilt. Vanessa, who was waiting next to him, immediately stepped forward and handed over Duque's robe. Thank you. While putting on his clothes, Duque suddenly remembered, yes, Vanessa, the first slap on my left cheek was also from Servanas, right? Why did she hit me? Dear beast. Oh, Master Grand Duke Marcus. Hey, you did it on purpose, didn't you? A black line appeared on Duque's forehead. Vanessa calmly helped Duque tidy up his clothes while replying, No, it was a slip of the tongue just now. It's not like that on purpose. For example, Master Grand Duke Marcus, this is called on purpose. Duque suddenly had the urge to slap this talkative maid to death. But thinking that the Van Cleef family was actually loyal to him, he could only drop the idea. Although you swore in your dream that you were speaking from your own conscience, unfortunately, according to my observation as a mere maid, your conscience does not reside in His Majesty Proudmoore's chest. The maid continued to show off her venomous tongue. Master, although you swore in your dream that you were speaking from your own conscience, unfortunately as a mere maid, your conscience does not reside in His Majesty's chest. Vanessa, who had undergone strict training to improve her manners, said in the most elegant and dignified manner and the most serious tone, "The reason why His Majesty Cervantes was so angry is probably because you could accurately pass through Proudmoore's breastplate defense line in your sleep and accurately grasp your conscience, through the gaps in his clothes." At this moment, Duque only wanted to say, "What the heck?" In fact, Duque really wanted to ask the maid in return, "If my conscience grew on your chest, then can I still touch my conscience to speak?" After thinking about it, Duque gave up. If Vanessa suddenly had a brain cramp and fearlessly sacrificed herself to have a monkey with him, wouldn't she give birth to an enhanced version of the venomous tongue monkey? No. This scene was too horrifying. Duque decided to stop imagining it. Alright, in front of a great enemy, this kind of small matter should be put aside for now. After confirming his equipment, Duque strode out of the room. Since he was the boss, he naturally had the aura of a boss. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Duque discovered that Tyraean was actually waiting at the door. However, Tyralian's condition was a little bad. Not only was his armor damaged, but the holy light on his body was also a little weak. In the eyes of Pharaoh, who could sense the elements, every holy night was like a gigantic light bulb. Regardless of day or night, they would emit light and heat in the elemental domain, clearer than a lighthouse in the dark. Tyralian's holy light energy was at most 50% of its peak. It seemed that this was the result of a round of recovery. Report. Yes. Tyralian replied as he secretly gestured. After a few steps, a face that Duque was familiar with appeared. She was Mograine's adopted daughter, the little priest, Sally Metwain. She followed Duque's footsteps and released a mixture of holy light with her hands, gently healing the wound on Duque's face. Duque was a little embarrassed. "Don't mind my presence. This is just a minor subcutaneous bleeding. It will heal soon." Duque forced himself to divert his attention. "It's already the third morning since you fainted. In fact, our results in the first 2 days were not bad. Although we retreated from the foot of the mountain all the way to the mountainside, we estimated that we killed more than 1 million Scourge and Burning Legion soldiers and elites. The key is that we killed the 2 leaders of the Burning Legion in your intelligence report, Abyss Lord Asgalar and Dreadlord Ansaron." "Oh? That's not bad." "The ones who dealt the final blow were the Orc hero Grum Hellscream and the Blood Elf hero Kale, that Sunstrider." "Huh. That's impressive." Duque was really surprised. Duque knew that Lord Howl had a halo that increased the attack power of the Abyss Lord by 1000%. Originally, it was Lord Howl who killed Manaroth with his axe twice in a row in history. It was not surprising that Duque killed Abyss Lord Asgalar again. What was surprising was that Kaizi actually went all out. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for mages to steal kills. Tyralian added, "In order to kill the enemy Kale, that's transformed into a huge fire phoenix and crashed directly into the Dreadlord, burning Ansaron to death in close combat. Now even the Blood Elves have begun to praise his bravery. Although the Blood Elves seem to be unable to forgive his past betrayal, at least they won't be hostile to him." Wow. Kaizi was really trying his best to wash away the stain on his name. Walking out of the fortress, the strong sunlight almost blinded Duque. After recovering his vision, the first thing Duque saw was the traces of a great battle stretching from afar to near. Ever since Duque proposed the concept of the 1,000-layer skirt, the dwarves really took this move to the extreme. Within a limited period of time, he had recklessly built a total of 21 city walls. Then he had built 49 bunkers on the relatively open mountainside. Damn, it scared Duque so much that he almost thought that Archimond was the monk who had to overcome 81 difficulties to go to the west to obtain Buddhist scriptures, and that they were the goblins who blocked his path to wealth. Okay, get to the point. The abilities of the remaining 2 demon lords are very strange. Mograine, Sar, and Grom have each killed the 2 great demons twice. But every time we killed one of them, the other one would go berserk, and not long after, the demon that was killed would resurrect. Once resurrected, the 2 demons will become a huge cocoon. No matter how we attack, we can't break the defense of the two cocoons until they regain their mobility at the same time. Turalyon paused for a moment. I don't know if it's an illusion, but the time it takes for them to regain their mobility is getting shorter and shorter. It would have been better if Turalyon didn't say it. Once he said it, Duque was stunned. Then he laughed out loud. Why was he laughing? Thinking back to the first time he played World of Warcraft, 40 little amusing friends gathered together, but they couldn't even get past the Molten Core's door god. At that time, looking at the ground full of corpses, it was really King tragic. Before Duque transmigrated, the version of the game was already very late. But the current timeline that Duque was in was only 15 years after the Dark Portal. Those tactics and boss strategies that were common in the eyes of the veterans in the future were all rare stuff in this timeline. Sure enough, only at this time the power of the Transmigrator's cheat would be off the charts. Ah. The tricks of the Burning Legion's great demons are not bad. But I, Duke Marcus, have seen through everything. Chapter 943. What were soldiers most afraid of on the battlefield? The first thing they feared was having stupid teammates. As the saying went, don't be afraid of a godlike boss but be afraid of a stupid teammate. In fact, there was another kind of existence above a stupid teammate, which was called a boss who caused others to die. If your teammates were stupid, you might be saved if you relied on yourself to become godlike. If your boss was stupid and forced you to die, there was really no need to save you. Just write your will. The general was the courage of the soldiers. It meant that a cowardly general would definitely have a group of weak soldiers. Very few people knew that there was actually a saying, the commander is the soul of the general. After all, the generals were just the executors of the strategy. The most terrifying thing was the failure of the strategy. In a situation where even the generals were at a loss of what to do, if even the supreme commander did not know what to do, how could the soldiers have the courage to fight the enemy? Now Duque's arrogant laughter was spread everywhere. In the ears of the soldiers, it was not frightening but heavenly. However, I, Duque, have seen through everything. When these arrogant words were heard by the soldiers who were already beginning to feel uneasy, it was no different from a large dose of reassurance. That's right. The invincible commander of the Alliance, Lord Marcus, had found a way to defeat the enemy. What else do we have to be afraid of? At times like this, the reputation that Duque had made could play an unimaginable role. Without the reminder of the officer, the veterans had already automatically remembered the various glorious achievements of Duque in the past. Since the first battle at the Door of Darkness, every battle Duke fought, even if he lost, it was a glorious defeat. It was true that he had lost Stormwind City, but he had burned 100,000 orcs and let Lothar take the head of the first orc chief, Blackhand. In the face of the crazy attacks of the tribe, he had been defeated, retreated, and felt helpless. However, Duque seemed to be the embodiment of the strong will of the human race. By continuously uniting forces that could be united, he still led the alliance to become stronger and stronger even though he had to fight for tens of thousands of miles. In the end, he successfully turned the tables and defeated the orcs. It was the same this time. The death of the Calamity army once shrouded most of the sky above the Rotterdam continent. However, Duque the king returned and led everyone to launch a counterattack. Tirisful Woodland was the only place left in Lordaeron. Apart from the Silverpine Forest, which was still filled with werewolves, most of the fallen areas on the Lordaeron continent had been recovered. That's right. As long as Lord Duke Marcus leads us, we will be victorious. Suddenly, in the distance, a wounded soldier with a broken arm struggled to run over, knelt on one knee in front of Duque and asked excitedly, "Commander Marcus, have you found a way to win?" Seeing that the bandage on the soldier's shoulder was still bleeding, Duque couldn't help but feel a lump in his throat. "Yes, we'll use the heads of those two demons as tables later." "Thank you, Your Excellency." The soldier kowtowed heavily. Duque's bold words quickly spread. "Will we win in the end?" "I will. We will definitely win. Please take care of yourself, Your Excellency. I would like to have you present me with an award during the victory ceremony." "I will. I definitely will." More and more soldiers gathered around Duque. Even the heavily wounded who couldn't get out of bed sat up with the help of their comrades. Not only the soldiers of the Alliance, but even the warriors of the Horde shouted and raised the weapons in their hands after hearing the translation. Swords and spears were like a forest, and the morale of the army was like a mountain. Thousands of voices were shouting and calling, and then converged into one, turning into a shocking sound wave that went straight into the sky. "Victory! Victory! Victory! Victory!" Victory. Victory. Yes. We will definitely win. We have always believed in it. At this moment, on the battlefield in front of them. It was located at the entrance of the open land on the mountainside. Once they broke through, it would be a vast expanse of flat land. Other than the blockhouses built by the Alliance, there was no other place to defend. Although the narrow road from the mountainside to the top of the mountain was starting to build a wall, everyone knew that the wall was really useless against greater demons of such a level. The mortal soldiers in the coalition army had no choice but to risk their lives and rush up from the sides of the cocoons before they exploded to support their allies on the mountain road and the city wall. This was to stop the small fries of the Burning Legion and not let them affect the experts of the Alliance to surround and kill these two demon lords. Mograine was very tired. He leaned on the heavy Ashbringer and panted heavily. A third of his golden armor had already been torn, and he looked more like a beggar. Grom's famous blood howl was thrown on the ground in front of him. The incomparably strong man was currently covered in sweat, and he sat on the ground as if he had collapsed. The one who suffered the most was the Minotaur chief Cain. Because he was the largest and had the strongest vitality, he also suffered the most damage. Right now, Cain looked like a Fergana treasure cow. There were at least 100 large and small wounds all over his body, and all his hair was dyed red with blood and sweat. The blood seemed to be taking the opportunity to escape. Riataline was using all her strength to help him recover from his injuries. Holy Light Flash and Holy Light were thrown on the Minotaur chief like they were free. Just as every expert was dejected and panting in despair, trying to delay the arrival of the final moment, the sound on the mountain attracted their attention. That is. Wajin suddenly turned his head, his eyes full of confusion. Ah! Mograine laughed. Who else could it be besides him? Sal's face was full of a bitter smile. Although I don't want to admit it, we can only rely on him. At this moment, whether it was the experts of the Alliance or the tribe, they all thought of the same name. Sal secretly clenched his fist. He had Duque born him 15 years earlier. During Duque's glorious era, Sal was not yet born. When he grew up, Duque's glory continued. Then Sal, must work hard to build the tribe in the future so that the tribe completely surpasses the Alliance. Create a glory that belongs only to me, Sal. Not long after. Surrounded by a group of soldiers, Duque arrived. Smiling, Duque came to the side of Grom, who was panting. Grom, are you tired? It seemed like a concerned question, but in reality, it was a provocation. How could Grom be provoked with a good temper? He coldly snorted and pointed at Karzak's giant cocoon. Humph! I can still kill this guy 10 more times. Duque patted Grom's explosive green muscles. You don't need to kill him 10 times, just one more time and it will be over. Really? Grom's eyes burst out with a sharp light. At least we are still allies. Duque never lied to my allies. Duque's words were sonorous and powerful. Grom stood up again. If he was a tired beast just now, then he had now transformed into the most ferocious berserker. His entire body was filled with a strong desire to fight. Chapter 944. Duke walked from Grom's side to Alessandro's side and lightly knocked on his golden breastplate with his small fist, producing a clear and melodious sound. Duque walked away just like that. Mograine smiled. This was the Duque he knew. They had been comrades for more than 10 years, and even a word of encouragement was unnecessary. That action just now had already said everything. There was no need to say anything, just follow with your weapon. Mograine's body, which was nearing 60 years of age, seemed to be suddenly injected with the strongest vitality. He stood up abruptly, his movements so nimble that no one would have imagined that this was an old man who had been exhausted just a few seconds ago. Veterans did not die. He used his actions to show that he was not yet at the level of a veteran. Alexandros Mograine, can still fight for another 10 years. Sal stood up and hit himself in the chest with a single fist, making a loud bang sound. Kale, that stood up, his face full of hope for the future written all over his face. Cairn Bloodhoof stood up. He wanted to use his actions to tell the world the bravery of the Tauren tribe. Bulang took a deep puff of his cigar, then threw the remaining half of it on the ground, stomped on it a few times and picked up his new gun with a crack. At this moment, a whistling sound came from behind Duque. He did not think that it would be Tyrant Whisperwind riding a tiger and rushing over with her sentries. She was surprised by the scene in front of her. Originally, she had heard that the Alliance and Horde's crusade against the Burning Legion had fallen into a desperate situation, so she had hurriedly brought people down the mountain to maintain the situation. This was because Malfurion still needed at least half a day. Who knew that she would see such a scene when she came down? Gazing at the faces of the strong, every face was filled with confidence again, and there was a faint smile on their lips. This was not something a group of defeated generals should have. Tyron smiled too. Did I miss something? Duque's charming lips also curled into a smile. No. You came just in time. A good show is about to begin. If the heavy responsibility of saving the world was placed on the shoulders of an ordinary person, that person would either be driven crazy or be a Superman with a particularly big heart. Duque had never thought of himself as a Superman. I'm just a guild leader who's best at leading teams into instance dungeons. As long as I lead a party, even if I have to bet my life, I will be invincible, a certain transmigrator told himself. Listen to me and we will win. Duque didn't say it out loud, but the victorious expression on his face was so clear that it infected every expert of the Alliance or the Horde, making every expert choose to believe in Duque. Not far away, the giant blood-red cocoon that was the size of a small mountain began to tremble. It indicated that the two demon lords were about to awaken. A moment ago, every hero's heart was filled with worry and fear. They were not afraid of death, but they were afraid of being tortured to death without knowing why. A moment later, with the appearance of Duque, the atmosphere on the field completely changed. Now, every expert pricked up their ears and listened to Duque's orders. Duque snapped his fingers, and a huge blue arrow as tall as 3 people pointed to the empty space 100 meters to the left. Then, around the arrow was an illusory circle with a blue border. He opened his mouth and spoke in Orc language. Bloodhoof Chieftain, later, please pull Kazak over here. Try not to let him leave this area. Understood, Kane replied in a rough voice as he slammed the huge totem pole on the ground. With another snap of his fingers, Duke pointed to the right. Alexandros, bring Kezroga over here. The Ashbringer in Mograine's hand began to emit a golden light. As Duke gave out orders one by one, every powerhouse understood their own responsibilities. These heroes that the players were familiar with were no longer the great existences that they could only worship. At this moment, they were just members of Duque's party. Come on. Believing in Duque did not necessarily mean eternal life. However, there was no need to say anything about killing a boss to get rich. There was only one sentence to describe it. Bro, steady. The huge blood-colored cocoon finally peeled off from the two demon lords and floated away. The heads with huge horns had just seen the light of day. They originally had mocking expressions on their faces, wanting to see how these mortals would struggle in pain and despair. In the end, they saw a group of heroes with completely different mental appearances. Before Kazak could figure out what was happening, Kane had already let out a deafening roar. Kane's huge body charged forward. After his huge body, which weighed nearly 2 tons, entered the charged state, even the demon lord found it difficult to resist. Kazak took half a step back with his right leg and turned into a bow stance. He blocked Kane's charge and used his arms to block the totem pole that was suddenly smashing down. He thought that the old bull's attack would stop there, but who knew that he would not be able to cause further damage to Kazak. Kane rushed forward and blocked Kazak's demon horn with his bull's horn. Then, bah! He spat on Kazak's face. Before Kazak's counterattack arrived, he did an ugly but practical roll and rolled away, avoiding Kazak's counterattack. Kane beat his broad chest hard and roared again. There was no need to translate this posture. He was clearly saying, come on, demon brat. Let's hurt each other. Old Bull's vivid body language ridicule, a performance that transcended the boundaries of race and language, opened the eyes of the powerhouses of the 3 sections. On the other hand, Mograine was simpler and looked much more serious. The power of Ashbringer was condensed into a line, easily crossing a distance of nearly 100 meters, and slashed at Kazak's body. He was seducing this great demon. After so many battles, everyone knew that the most insidious thing about Kezroga was his mark of Kezroga. This evil curse that could not be lifted could periodically absorb mana from all heroes within the attack range for 5 seconds. Whoever did not have enough mana would directly detonate that unlucky person's magic circuit. Because of the intelligence, so far no one had really been detonated. But this thing was disgusting. At least the paladins and mages in the main force of the Alliance relied on mana to survive. This was why everyone was so tired. It was a double overdraft of the spirit and body. 100 meters was the maximum range of this evil mark. If Kazak did not care about Mograine, Mograine did not mind being a long-range attacker and cutting it to death. If Kazak went to kill Mograine, it would be exactly what he wanted. Sure enough, this great demon fell for it. Chapter 945. When the two great demons were successfully separated, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. The most disgusting thing about these two guys was that they both had imprints that absorbed magic power. It was true that most of the heroes on the side of the three-faction alliance had a lot of magic power. No matter how much magic power they had, they could not withstand the double burning of magic power from two different great demon imprints. Khazroga's imprint was fine. It burned a certain amount of magic power. Khazroga's imprint was crazy. It actually burned a certain percentage of magic power. The imprints of the two great demons piled together, and no one died after fighting for 4 rounds. This was actually a miracle. Of course, if it wasn't for the sense of crisis caused by the burning of too much magic power, it wouldn't have evolved into the previous chaotic fight where they killed one first. It was completely conceivable that if Duque did not come out, they would fall into a desperate cycle of endless resurrection of the demons on the opposite side. As long as the first hero died, it would be the beginning of the collapse. Now it was completely different. The changes brought about by the difference in the details were immediately felt when the first imprint descended 30 seconds after the start of the battle. Those who had magic circuits immediately found that their burden was reduced by more than half. Everyone looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. In the previous few battles, because the imprints descended on all the strong people at the same time, no one felt any difference. Now it was completely different. Moreover, the distribution of combat power was also very interesting. It seemed that the number of people on both sides was the same, and the attacks seemed to be similar. In fact, the heroes fighting against Khazroga basically did not use skills to attack. On Khazroga's side, except for Crazy Old Bull and Grom who did not have magic circuits who were attacking with all their might, the rest of the people were slacking. The real focus was on Duque's side. Whether it was Duque, Jaina, Ronin, Caponia, or Solarian, they were all firing with all their might. Compared to Kael'thas, who was only good at fire magic, the other pharaoh mainly focused on arcane magic, so they had more magic power. The storm of magic bombarded Khazroga's body, causing the huge demon to groan in pain. Luo Ning's arcane bomb hit his shoulder, shattering his pauldron. Without giving him any time to catch his breath, Jaina shot a frost arrow with all her might and completely froze his leg that was bent like a goat's leg. Less than a tenth of a second later, Duque's layered arcane shock blasted Khazroga's entire body backward and fell down. However, because his left leg was frozen, his huge body fell to the ground in a very comical manner, and his left leg was crushed underneath. Sylvanas exhaled and jumped into the air. With a triple shot, 3 exorcism arrows with a length of more than 1 meter hit Khazroga's huge bat wings. Wajin, who had been waiting for an opportunity for a long time, rushed forward on the spot. The dark spear troll's enchanted spear directly pierced through the demon lord's palm and nailed it to the ground. Initially, Mograine wanted to follow up with another slash. At this moment, Duque suddenly shouted, "Switch targets." The group of heroes who subconsciously wanted to follow up suddenly came to their senses and pulled back one after another, turning their firepower to Khazak. Khazroga struggled to get up, but he was held back by Mograine again. He did this a few times. Everyone didn't feel it at first, but they slowly realized what Duque was doing. This was to evenly distribute the damage suffered by the two demon lords. Khazak and Khazroga certainly knew what would happen next, but because they were too far away from each other, they had been held back by their respective sides and were unable to escape. They were simply unable to resist their own slide into the abyss of destruction. In Duque's retina, Duque, who had the leader template loaded, constantly fine-tuned the data with his will. After all, starting a team in reality was different from in the game. In the game there would be a clear HP. However, in a battle in reality, a series of data such as the degree of damage to the opponent's armor, the condition of the body, the concentration of dark power flowing out, and other data could be used to make a relatively objective and vague judgment of how much HP was left. At this time, Duque was simply using at least 10 Radiant Moon mages. He was also constantly commanding the overall situation and adjusting the distribution of combat power. This was not an easy task. In the game, Duque could use his identity as a team leader to teach disobedient team members a lesson. In reality, Duque couldn't stop the Little Prince of Death from going crazy. For example, Grom Hellscream. His attack was high and he hit hard enough. The problem was that this guy was too fierce. In the end, it was Cain who used his berserker warrior body to carry the monster. Grom was so fierce that Cain couldn't even hold him back. Khazak ignored the huge and unsightly Minotaur chief and chased after Grom, slashing at him in a daze. If it wasn't for the fact that Old Bull was asking for a beating in Khazak's eyes, and that Turayan would occasionally give Grom a protection blessing, so that Kazak couldn't use the huge Dragon King's blade to cut Grom, and Grom couldn't use Blood Roar to hit Kazak's face, who knew how Grom would die. Well, this guy was the kind of guy who would run out of his coffin even if he didn't die completely. Realizing that it was Turayan who stopped him and Kazak from hurting each other, Grom had the nerve to glare at Turayan fiercely. Okay, I'll change the description. Grom was the kind of guy who couldn't even be suppressed by a coffin. Finally, the time was right. Pull him together, Duque ordered. The two guys who were pulling the Demon Lord moved at the same time. Kane suddenly slammed into Kazak, using his totem pole to push away Kazak's claws. Then he rushed over and hugged Kazak's waist. Even though he was less than half Kazak's height, he did something that no one could imagine. Kane slammed into Karzak, then turned around nimbly. In less than a second he appeared behind Karzak, grabbed the root of Karzak's right wing with one hand, and grabbed Karzak's belt with the other. Hey Dash, this was lifting him up high. On the other side, Mograine directly used Ashbringer as a small hammer and hammered it into Kazak's chest. At the same time, the two demon lords who weighed more than 10 tons flew up. With the momentum of Mars colliding with Earth, they each crossed a distance of 100 meters and crashed into each other. The two greater demons screamed at the same time. They had just raised their claws in an attempt to break free from the awkward situation of the collision, but it was at this time that a figure in a blue and white robe appeared on their shoulders. He held a staff in one hand and a sword in the other. Duque smiled faintly. Yo, you might die if I swing my sword. Chapter 946. If he didn't show off after getting the first kill, he would be letting himself down. Of course, to the outside world, Duque could claim that it was to set an example and confidence for everyone in the upcoming Archaran War. Anyway, that was it. When the two demon lords collided and even their pauldrons were tangled together, Duque stood on Kazak's shoulder with his left leg and stepped on Khazroga's pauldron with his right foot, putting on a very cool pose. And the unknown holy sword in his hand was a great threat to the two demon lords. In the entire universe, nothing could stimulate the demons more than a holy sword full of righteous energy. Strictly speaking, Duque's holy sword was a smaller version of Quell Zarim. It was a top-grade item from the Pantheon. Without hesitation, Kazak and Khazroga simultaneously defined Duque, who was close to their vitals, as the most dangerous existence. They slapped their giant three-fingered claws at Duque. Who knew? Just before the two violent palms almost hit Duque, Duque smirked. Sorry I lied to you. After saying that, he ran away in an extremely irresponsible manner. He really teleported away. With a flash, he ran away again. With the two great demons in such a difficult situation, every move could lead to a fatal flaw. Grom, who had been watching from the side for a long time, jumped high on the spot, ready to make another shocking jump slash. In the end, Master Howl failed to steal the kill. He was hit by Kazak's void arrow in midair. In addition to the shadow damage, the most annoying thing about this thing was that it had a spatial attribute that slowed him down. The originally lightning-fast jump slash was forced to slow down by half. Master Howl was in tragedy, becoming a floating target in midair. Such a good human sandbag. If not you, who should I hit? Kazak did not hesitate to lose his center of gravity, wanting to pull out his other hand and throw it at Grom. Smack. Like a fly being swatted away, the poor Master Ho was sent flying hundreds of meters away. If it wasn't for Turalian's kindness of giving him a heroic level, Holy Flash, that had a casting time of 0.2 seconds when he was flying at high speed, his old body might not have been able to take it and he might have fallen to the ground. At that moment, Duque reappeared on Kazak's chest. When Duque unintentionally sold out his teammate, Grom, who tried to steal the kill, he also cheated all of Kazak and Khazroga's skills. At this moment, the two of them were completely empty. Duque's eyes sharpened and he sneered. In his heart, he muttered, "In the name of Ao Bing Queen, you're retarded." The powerful deceleration was directly cast on the weakened Khazroga. Even though he was a demon lord, under the full cast of a Breaking Dawn Archmage, he was still hit. His huge yellow demon body was slowed down by more than half. On the other side, looking at Kazak's ugly face that he had seen more than once, Duque could not help but think of the time when this guy sneaked into Karazhan and almost destroyed his home. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. I didn't kill you last time, and now you're asking for it in front of me again? Tell me, are you selling swords? Are you a cheap bastard? Duque's entire right arm seemed to have fused with the unknown holy sword, turning into a dazzling golden stream of light. With a light push, it had already crossed several meters of space. Demon Lord Kazak tried his best to tilt his neck back, trying to avoid the sword. Space seemed to be strangely dislocated, and all his efforts were exchanged for a very strange tilt of his head. Kazak was horrified to find that the back of his head had actually touched the back of his neck. Only bystanders could clearly see that when he leaned back with all his strength, a golden horizontal line just happened to appear at the connection between his head and neck. The golden line continued to extend backward. A faint shockwave rippled through the air. Only the experts with good eyesight could see that a slender and narrow golden blade of light had swept across the sky just now. It had passed through Kazak's neck, which was so thick that it would take at least 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Finally, it had fallen to the ground and carved out a neat horizontal line. Time seemed to be frozen at that moment. Even though he had witnessed all this, the terrifying power of the breaking dawn level, deceleration, made it take at least 3 seconds for Demon Lord Kazak to show a horrified expression on his face. Duque smoothly performed a gorgeous reverse stab. Time returned to normal only when the slender golden sword pierced through Kazak's brow without any hindrance. The only thing he could do was to scream for the last time in his life, "New dash!" Under the gazes of thousands of soldiers and the powerhouses of the Alliance tribe Night Elf and Night Elf factions, the righteous Duque succeeded in stealing the kill. Looking at Grom Hellroar, who was struggling to get up in the distance, Duque laughed maliciously. "Sorry. When it comes to stealing kills, although you're at the grandfather level, I'm a swordsman at the ancestor level." In the air, Duque, who had cast the deceleration on himself, slowly descended like a feather rippling in the wind. In the background, the 2 mountain-like bodies of the 2 demon lords suddenly collapsed, splashing dust all over the sky. The victory this time seemed to have come too easily. Instead, it made all the experts feel that it was unreal. Think about it, a large group of people fought to the death and killed these 2 demons twice. But the result? Brother Spring was resurrected with full health. Who could guarantee that these 2 demons would not resurrect together this time? At this moment, almost every powerhouse had the same question in their minds. Are they dead? Cocoons? No. Then, did we win? We really won? Duque smiled and gave an affirmative answer. Yes, we won. His smile was light and breezy, and he had the means to turn them into ashes as he talked. It did not seem like much of a change in tactics, but it succeeded in easily killing the invincible enemy in everyone's hearts. What kind of wisdom was this? What kind of calmness was this? Every powerhouse was shocked. Very strangely, everyone suddenly wanted to see the 2 terrifying demons jump up and shout, "Let's fight for another 300 rounds," or something. However, this was impossible. The 2 huge corpses just lay there quietly, becoming another backdrop for Duque's undefeated legend. At this time, Duque waved to Tyrant. Come, please loot the corpses. Oh, and count the spoils." Tyrant was a little stunned. "Me?" Chapter 947. After transmigrating to Azeroth for so long, Duque had figured out the rules. The equipment dropped by the boss wasn't determined by the order in which it appeared in the game. Instead, it was determined by the boss's own level. As long as one had the ability to defeat the boss that would only appear in later versions, they would still be able to obtain the best equipment. For example, according to the game's history, players had to go back in time through the Caverns of Time to relive the classic, earth-shattering battle of Mount Hyjal. Therefore, according to the version back then, there would be a 6th set, which was commonly known as T6, as well as individual equipment of the corresponding level. Previously, when Duque dealt with Deathwing, he got better equipment, but it was a pity that it was too little. How could it be like now, where he had the chance to change equipment in batches? After coming to Azeroth, Duque seemed to have gotten lucky a lot. There were also cases of him looting all the items on Auro's drop list. But unless it was absolutely necessary, Duque did not want to loot the corpse himself. After all, Duque was still a little superstitious. Back when he was leading the team, Duque was very popular as the team leader. That was an era where only the team leader could loot the corpse. In one of the harvesting teams in the Molten Core, Duque took a druid called Nightwind and a warlock called Susaru in one go. The 2 newbies were covered in green equipment, and they got an 8-piece Epic Cenarian set and Vengeance set. They also gave each of them a T2 head. Didn't the team lack druids and warlocks back then? Duque did not understand. Why did the other 37 people go to Steel Stove Fort and scold Duque for being the Black Hand after he had trained 2 elites for the team? It was clear how much Duque was loved by the team members. Duque said to Nightwind and Nightwind. You two, for the sake of the team's advancement, I did not hesitate to take the risk of being scolded by our brothers and sisters to train you in one go. Do you understand this kindness? Yes. The two naive newbies nodded. Thus Duque gained two hardcore fans. Yes, Duque was a lucky hand, there was nothing wrong with that. Alright, ever since Duque transmigrated, he actually felt that he was quite lucky. One could never be too careful. He had killed the tribe's first great chief, Black Hand. What if the old man couldn't keep his coffin lid down and came out to curse Duque's luck in the name of being the Black Hand? Thus, in order to prevent the curse of the Black Hand from attaching itself to his Kirin arm, Duque pretended to be impartial and allowed Tyrant, who seemed to be the most objective, to loot the corpse. As Tyrant rummaged through the spatial pouch that connected the souls of the two demon lords, she heard gasps from the side. Not to mention the fact that they were used to hardships, it was even difficult for them to find an epic-grade equipment. That group of people who had been slaves and savages for more than 10 years, of course they wouldn't have any good equipment. On the Alliance's side, the experts' eyes were filled with envy. This was an era where even epic-grade equipment could only be found in the royal treasuries of various countries. It wasn't the era where godly equipment could be found everywhere and epic-grade equipment was as common as dogs. Think about it, even a big shot in the Alliance like Mograine couldn't gather a full set of epic-grade equipment, let alone others. At a time when epic-grade equipment was extremely rare, there was actually a large pile of high-grade epic-grade equipment. Who wouldn't be tempted? Duque spoke. These epic-grade equipment are mostly spoils of war from the Burning Legion's conquest of various planets. Now they are our spoils of war. Although the size isn't right, as long as a master-level blacksmith modifies it slightly, we can immediately turn it into our own battle power. Since the three factions are working together today, I won't hide anything. However, for the sake of better cooperation, I hope that we can set a rule for the equipment distribution here. Please speak. As long as it's reasonable, the tribe will accept it. Sar nodded. Tyron nodded nonchalantly. Sigh. The Night Elves had a large pile of good stuff from the High Elf Empire. At this time the Night Elves were rich, so of course they didn't care. Duque said, first of all, no matter which side's hero, as long as he participated in the battle against the enemy leader, he is entitled to enjoy the spoils of war. Sar and Tyron nodded. If there was a share of the effort, there was a share of the spoils. This also meant that Duque wouldn't spit out the spoils of war from Reggie Winterfrost, because that guy was killed by Duque alone. Secondly, the spoils of war will be distributed according to the principle of priority. If someone from the three factions needs that equipment, they will have priority to discuss it. If the discussion fails, the dice will be thrown to decide. After saying that, Duque threw a handful of 5 dice to the ground. Everyone can check the dice. Sir didn't move, but Wajin checked it carefully, waited, and then nodded. Finally, about the proportion of equipment distribution. I don't want to divide it according to who is strong or weak or who made the last blow. Those who are capable of participating in the siege against the enemy leader can have a share after the battle, regardless of whether they are dead or alive. Duque's proposal naturally sounded like the Alliance had the advantage because the Alliance had the most heroes. In fact, Sar could tell at a glance that it wasn't a big problem. He ignored Tyrant, the only seedling of the Night Elves. The Horde had fewer heroes. But one look at their professions and you could tell that the Horde were all warriors. Sar hadn't become a shaman yet and was still a warrior. Wajin was also mainly a melee fighter, not to mention Grom, Kane, Varrock and Brock, who were all muscular men. On the other hand, on the Alliance's side, all melee fighters were paladins. In other words, as long as the Horde took all the plate armor of the warriors, or left 1 or 2 of the most inconspicuous ones for the Alliance, there would be no problem. Duque's distribution plan seemed to have a lot of rules, and the benefits that should be given to the Horde were not reduced. Coincidentally, when he killed Auro, he didn't drop a single piece of warrior equipment. Duque let the others show it off and that was it. He killed Ansaron and 5 Dreadlords as well as the Abyssal Lord Asgalar, and the 2 Demon Lords Kazak and Kazroga. He had looted over 30 pieces of epic equipment in total. Maybe it was because Kazak and Kazroga had doubled their equipment, but the gloves that could theoretically be exchanged for a T6 set actually dropped 4 pieces of each type. The Horde didn't know what these things, which looked like they were made of scrap metal, were used for. In the end, Duque quietly took all 4 of the Forgotten Guardian gloves, which were used by warriors, hunters, and shamans, and gave them to Queen Sylvie and Lilith as well as Aurelia and Sasha, who would be returning in the future. In exchange, Duque took out the bloodstained pauldrons and berserk shackles. which were specially used by berserkers, and gave them to Grom. Seeing how happy Grom was, Duque suddenly felt that he was guilty. Chapter 948. Duque didn't feel guilty at all for tricking a great hero like Grom. The biggest difference between individual pieces and set pieces was, of course, not the attributes of the individual pieces, but the bonus after a certain number of pieces of the set. Could be attributes or skills. With a complete set, there would be no problem at all in defeating monsters of the same level. That was why the set was called work clothes for a reason. During the exchange, Sal also asked Duque. Duque's explanation was, "I feel the power of a ranger on the Forgotten Guardian gloves." No one knew what these pieces of equipment that had yet to reveal all their attributes looked like. "The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm betting on the future." Sal was silent for a long time. The Alliance had the dwarves, the best master craftsmen in Azeroth, as their foundation, so their confidence was completely different. While the Horde was letting the better orc laborers forge bronze, the Alliance was already discussing what brand to use and what strength and toughness to forge the weapons. In particular, the 13 years of human slavery to the orcs had almost completely destroyed the orcs' legacy in the field of forging. Even though he knew that these 4 pairs of gloves were probably better things, Sal had to agree to Duque using 2 pieces of berserker equipment to exchange for the 2 Forgotten Guardian gloves that should have been given to the Horde. Because ready-made equipment could form an immediate combat power. Of course, the more important reason why Sal agreed to the exchange was that Duque had saved Grom's life in the Battle of Manaroth. Compared to the life of the Horde's #1 warrior and the life of a chief who was the core of the Horde, losing a little in terms of equipment wasn't a big deal. That was why in the afternoon, when Duque asked Bulang to forge the Forgotten Guardian gloves into Galan Wanderer gloves that could be used by rangers, Sal didn't think much of it. The orc heroes all felt that it didn't matter even if Duque took advantage of them. After all, without Duque to lead them, they might have all been wiped out in the last battle. How could they have defeated the boss and split the equipment? Sal would never know that the dirty Duque had already calculated it. In theory, Archimonde would also drop the Forgotten Guardian helmet. After killing Kazak and Kazroga, the 2 Burning Legion leaders who had inexplicably turned into Gemini mode, the Burning Legion's offensive became silent. At this moment, the Horde and the Night Elves were in an argument. In this era, if 30% of the troops were still able to remain standing, they would already be considered elites. In reality, the Horde's losses had reached 40%. The Alliance's side was slightly better at 25%. But the more modern Alliance had already used up 80% of their ammunition. In truth, the Alliance's combat strength had dropped even more. The only reason he was able to hold on until now was because of his last breath. The reason for the dispute was that the tribe couldn't hold on any longer and asked if they could evacuate some of their people first. Many tribal chiefs felt that the tribe had paid enough and that it was time to retreat. Otherwise, even if they won this world war, they would still lose the next battle for survival. One had to know that the Horde not only had the Alliance as their enemy, but even in Durotor itself, the Horde still had to face the Centaurs and Boars, 2 huge races with a total of more than 100,000 people. Tyrande, on the other hand, hoped that the Alliance and the Horde would hold the line until Malfurion was fully prepared. Sal suggested, "Anyway, the Night Elves just want us to stall for time, right? Then leave 10,000 elites in the tribe?" Tyrande argued, "What if the remaining people can't hold on?" Before Sal could speak, Wajin retorted, "Isn't there still the Night Elves' army? You have an army of more than 100,000 people, but only some of the rangers were used at the beginning, playing archery games in the safest arrow towers." Tyrande's eyes widened in anger. "How did that big bug die in the camp at the foot of the mountain?" Wajin rolled his eyes. "Well, you even cast 2 rounds of magic. Ha. Could it be that the Night Elves are just a bunch of people who only dare to hide in the dark and shoot arrows and magic? No wonder the Grey Valley didn't dare to fight us head-on, it's because Grom ridiculed them as soon as he arrived." He easily evoked Tyrande's memories. This crazy guy in front of her had killed Cenarius. Even if it was only for a short while, Cenarius had returned to the depths of the planet. Tyrande was also furious. "If your tribe thinks that the Burning Legion is more worthy of your loyalty, you can also join them. The beastmen drinking the demon's blood was also considered a great humiliation by the entire new tribe. Now that Tyrande had exposed the tribe's scars, the heroes of the tribe also felt like they had been slapped in the face. Enough. Thrall stopped his subordinates from causing a ruckus. Rather, the wise Thrall used his reckless subordinates as a cover and put on a good show. Tyrande Whisperwind. In order to stop the Arc-Herons from devouring the power of the World Tree and the Well of Eternity, tens of thousands of Alliance and Horde warriors have fallen on this mountain path forever. If you want this great alliance to continue, show me your trump card. At least show me and Duke Marcus. Tyron bit her lip, her gaze like lightning as she swept across the heroes of the Alliance and Horde. You don't understand what the Night Elves are prepared to sacrifice. She was actually refusing to show her trump card. Thrall suddenly took a step forward. You won't even tell us how long we have to hold on? If you are willing to see the world destroyed and everyone perish together, then you can leave first. Tyron slammed the table. Duque rubbed his brow. In the game, the alliance of the three factions was so close to each other that they were like brothers who had grown up together. In reality, there was already a huge conflict between the three factions. If not for the fact that they had a common enemy, it would have been a miracle for them to be able to work together. However, Duque would not allow the situation to worsen. If he allowed the hot-tempered orcs to continue arguing, everything would only be ruined. Sal, can you and your chieftains leave for a while? I would like to speak to Sir Whisperwind alone. As soon as Duque said this, most of the orc heroes calmed down. He could ignore other people's face but not Duke's. Grom, who had been saved by Duque, immediately changed the topic. All right, for your sake, I won't say anything. In the Horde, Grom's authority was second only to Thrall, and Thrall was happy to see Duque step out to smooth things over. Soon, only Duque and Tyron were left in the large meeting room. Duque's words caused Tyron's face to pale. I just want to ask, who among the Night Elves wants to blow up the Alliance, Horde, and Burning Legion all at once? Chapter 949. Tyron was so terrified that Duque only realized it when his face was less than 10 centimeters away from her. Like a startled rabbit, he subconsciously shrank back. Duque did not let Tyron go. He pressed forward. Thump thump thump. Tyron took 3 steps back. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Duque pressed forward 3 steps. Finally, Duque even did a standard wall slam. He pressed his left hand against the wall and placed his right hand on his waist, using his aura to suppress Tyrant, who was already leaning against the wall. One person. One elf. Their faces were so close that they could clearly feel each other's breathing. Tyron was a little embarrassed. Duke Marcus, you're threatening the High Priest of the Moon Goddess. Duque said shamelessly. Tyron Whisperwind, I'll tell you right now that wizards don't believe in gods. Are you trying to betray Azeroth? Don't flatter me. Your words are very good, but they can only fool the rough people in the tribe. It's useless against me. You refuse to tell me where the 100,000 elites of the Night Elves are from the start. Do you really think the scouts of the Alliance are all blind? After the 3 races formed an alliance, you Night Elves used the excuse of evacuating civilians to evacuate most of the elves from Mount Hyjal. But only the most elite Night Elves have been guarding the sacred mountain. Unless they're special craftsmen, civilians are not allowed to go up the mountain. Tyrant pursed her lips and did not say a word. She stared into Duque's eyes, as if trying to see what other cards this human commander from the other side of the Endless Sea had. Duque did not care. He continued, let me guess. The Night Elves were originally prepared to follow the ancient oath from 9,000 years ago. They were prepared to sacrifice their entire race to protect the World Tree. However, the Beastman's performance in Grey Valley, as well as the alliance between the 3 factions, gave you new hope. How good would it be if you could use the tribe, your mortal enemy, to protect the World Tree and allow the Night Elves to continue reproducing? It would be even better if the tribe died with the Burning Legion. Tyron swayed slightly. Even if she hid it very well, it was a pity that she couldn't hide it from Duque, whose body was almost touching hers. How do we do that? The Horde was not stupid. If they suffered too much, they would naturally retreat. After all, the orcs were not native to Azeroth. The only conclusion is that the Night Elves can do what they did to the Burning Legion in the ancient war 10,000 years ago. This time, Tyron could no longer control herself. Her red lips opened and closed like a fish that had been dragged onto the shore. Don't talk nonsense without evidence. At this moment, Duque really wanted to say, do you really think I don't know about the super explosion of Mount Hyjal in the original history? It directly blew up Mount Hyjal to the point where not even a blade of grass could grow for 10 years. It was just that Duque had never thought that the Night Elves, who were originally very conservative and abiding by their oaths, and had made great sacrifices for the greater good in history, would actually play such tricks. Or did it go wrong? Or was there a huge deviation in history? Duque finally gave his answer after much thought. I also know that the reappearance of the High Elves has put a lot of pressure on you, right? But you had no choice but to accept the High Elves entering Mount Hyjal in order to save the world. In the historical Battle of Mount Hyjal, there were no High Elves or Blood Elves. Janus Theramore soldiers would definitely not have any conflicts with the Night Elves. 8,000 years ago, the Night Elves exiled the High Elves as blasphemers. Who would have thought that Duque would bring Queen Sylvanas' Blood Elf Rangers over this time? This was clearly a slap to the face. When Duque said this, Tyron's eyes were already glistening with tears. However, Duque continued to use his magnetic voice as if he was speaking to Tyron, but was actually trying to persuade her. I think that perhaps our destruction of nature's buildings and cannons, as well as the Horde's incessant cutting of trees, have provoked your druids? This was another contradiction that could not be resolved. To put it bluntly, the Night Elves were idealistic while the dwarves and gnomes were materialistic. On one side they advocated for Greenpeace while on the other, they engaged in highly polluting industries. It would be a miracle if the druids were happy with the dwarves' cannons. At this time, Duque's words had already caused Tyron to tremble uncontrollably. Duque made the final blow to Tyron. The one who put so much pressure on you and advocated for getting rid of those untrustworthy blasphemers and Cenarius murderer was Fandral Staghelm, wasn't it? This sentence was definitely a fatal blow. Tyron's mouth twitched for a long time before she finally broke down and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've never thought of harming an ally. I really didn't think." Tyron, who had supported the Night Elves for 10,000 years with her head and shoulders lowered, looked no different from a weak human girl at this moment. The only difference was that even though tears were already welling up in her eyes, she still did not cry. But when I think about the huge sacrifices we Night Elves are about to make, we have a cruel new neighbor and an alliance that has accepted our exiles watching from the sidelines. I can't calm down. Tyron suddenly straightened her back, puffing out her chest and sucking in her stomach. From her bones, every movement she made exuded an awe-inspiring righteousness. Duque couldn't help but loosen his grip on the wall and take half a step back. "All right, Your Excellency Duke Marcus, I'll answer your questions one by one. Your conjecture is only half right. But the explosion plan you mentioned does indeed exist. In the ancient war, the powerful guardian dragons were unable to stop the invasion of the Burning Legion. Why should we believe that you mere mortals can stop the footsteps of the demons? Even if the demons have been weakened by magic formations. Ugh. The power of the explosion is directly proportional to the number of souls sacrificed by the Night Elves. 100,000 elites were prepared to sacrifice themselves to protect this beautiful world. But how could we bear to see our remaining clansmen being bullied by cruel tribes after their sacrifice? How could we bear to see our beautiful forests being destroyed by wanton felling of trees? So dare I ask, isn't it too much to plan for the worst-case scenario? Furthermore, I haven't agreed to carry out Fandral Staghelm's plan." At this moment, Duque suddenly understood the true intentions of the Night Elves. They were kinder than he had imagined. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.